Here with Ron Gilbert checking out Thimbleweed Park. You showed it at GDC, if I remember correctly, but this is probably the biggest showing you've had of it so far here at PAX East. Is that right?
Yeah, this is the first time the public will have had a chance to play the game.
Wow. So how does that feel to show a point-and-click classic style, though with a revamped look? Certainly, the graphics are beautiful. To show this kind of a game at a show of this size and of this style.
It's nerve-wracking.
I'd imagine. If I were you, I would so badly want people to be able to experience what I came up with, but this is such a tough setting for that kind of experience.
Yeah, I mean, shows are always hard, and I think they can be really hard for adventure games, because adventure games are about story and character, and they're oftentimes a very slow burn. You really kind of get into them, and you have to spend time with them, and shows are not always conducive to that, because there's a lot of noise, and people are trying to get through quickly. So I think it's always a challenge with adventure games.
Sure. But thanks to the fact that you kind of invented this genre, and you've got an awesome booth, beautiful artwork all around, I have high hopes that you're going to have a great turnout this year.
Yeah, we're just trying to dazzle people with our awesome booth, and maybe they won't notice the game.
So we have our friend Caitlin Cook playing the game. She's our Destructoid's resident point-and-click expert. Who are these characters, and what are they doing at this dead body?
Well, this is Agent Ray and Agent Reyes, and they have showed up because this body was found in the river outside Thimbleweed Park, and so they're here to investigate. So I think what they've done so far is they needed to take a picture of the body, which they did that. The game takes place in 1987, so they've got an old Polaroid camera, and they've taken a picture of the body, and now that they have the picture, they can head into town and talk to the sheriff and figure out what to do. So, I mean, the game is kind of about, well, what happened to this body? What is this body that was found in the river? Who killed this person? What's going on here? And so you kind of assess that out as the detectives.
Gotcha. So the dead body is the impetus for discovering the whole town of Thimbleweed Park.
Yeah, I mean, the dead body is, I describe it as it's a MacGuffin, right? It really doesn't matter. Matter of fact, the dead body stays in the river for the entire game, and nobody even bothers to move it. So it really is kind of unimportant at some level, but it kind of gets the story moving, and it's like the tip of this very strange and bizarre iceberg that is Thimbleweed Park.
So Maniac Mansion, one of the first games you started with, I think you did the Labyrinth game before that, if I remember correctly.
I didn't work on the Labyrinth.
Oh, that was David Fox.
Yeah, that was David. He worked on the Labyrinth, but yeah, Labyrinth came right before Maniac Mansion.
So Maniac Mansion gave you a house to explore. Would you say that Maniac Mansion as a setting, as a house, would fit in the larger town of Thimbleweed Park?
Definitely, and funny you should mention that, because there is a very large mansion in the county of Thimbleweed, which you get to explore, and it will have some very familiar places.
That's got I got a lot to look forward to. Maniac Mansion, I love every iteration of Maniac Mansion, from the TV show to the recent fan-made movie. Just it's in my DNA. I first played it when I was just old enough to figure out that video games could be something truly transportive. Not just Root Beer Tapper and Pac-Man. So I'm curious about, because you've made a lot of games, why did you go for the style that's most reminiscent of Maniac Mansion as opposed to Monkey Island or many of the other games you've worked on? What made you want to return to that Maniac Mansion look?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with working with Gary Winnick again, because Gary and I, had created and designed Maniac Mansion, and, we were talking one day just about the charm of those old games. And it seems like, adventure games today, while there are a lot of really good ones, they do seem to be missing the charm that those old games had. And we were just talking about, well, what is that charm? Which really, led us to doing the Kickstarter.
Right. So the charm, Ransom the Clown, who we're seeing now, or he goes on to be a clown. This looks like when he's a wannabe clown as a youth. Is this what this flashback is showing us?
No, he just doesn't have his makeup and his nose on. So that's one of the things that the player needs to do is get his makeup and get his hair done and get his nose on and find his joke book so he can go on stage.
Gotcha. So speaking of jokes, what did you learn from your prior experience writing jokes for video games? What did you try to do differently with Thimbleweed Park than you did with prior games?
I don't know if we're doing anything differently. I think, the humor that was in, Maniac Mansion and Monkey Island, I was very happy with that style of humor. And so I think this was more about, well, how do we replicate that? And how do we improve on it? Because, gamers have grown since then, right? I don't know that you could do a complete knockoff of those games. I think you have to change and adjust some things in them. So, there are things we are doing just about, how the story is told and how the pacing of things is, and a little bit about how the dialogues are done. That we're trying to kind of modernize a little bit of it, but still keep the charm of those old games.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I heard you say at some point that Thimbleweed Park is how you remember Maniac Mansion and Monkey Island being, but without any of the problems that were just key to the era. You've learned a lot since then.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people played those games, Monkey Island, Maniac Mansion, and stuff, and they remember them with this. I think people remember those games being a lot better than they were, and so I think this was, to try to say, okay, well, we're going to take all the dumb things about those games and get rid of them, but keep all the really great things. And we've done a lot with the visuals and the graphics. It is very subtle stuff. To just kind of give it a little more shine to it, that I think is how your mind kind of remembered those games being, but we're trying to actually replicate that.
Right, and then in 20 years you'll be trying to make a game that's as good as we remember Thimbleweed Park being.
Yeah, it's remembering how you remembered the games. So it's like the inception. It's this whole inception of remembering video games we're going to do,
which a lot of people said about The Force Awakens. Used to work for George Lucas in a sense, and now his characters are owned by Disney, and I guess your characters are owned by Disney too.
Yeah, that is true. We're all in the vault together, I guess.
So how would you feel about it if J.J. Abrams came out and made the Monkey Island movie?
I don't know how I'd feel about that. I mean, it's like I loved Lost. I thought Lost was a brilliant television show. I was not happy with what he did to Star Trek, and I really was not happy with what he did to Force Awakens.
Interesting.
So I'm not sure that I necessarily want him touching Monkey Island.
Well, I think what he tried to do with Force Awakens is make Star Wars the way we remembered it, to the point where he just kind of made Star Wars again with different characters. I suppose for a game adaptation that might work, but that's not what you're doing here. You're neither the George Lucas or J.J. Abrams of video games, are you?
No, I'm the Ron Gilbert of video games.
Of movies, I meant to say, I said something dumb to one of my favorite video game developers ever. I'm sorry, I'm leaving. Goodbye.